Hi everybody. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about storage, and I get a lot of questions about how to store your beads. Now for bead mosaics, you do tend to need to store more beads than you did when you had jewelry. So a lot of the jewelry organization systems don't work because the quantities of beads that we're working with is much greater. And just as an example, I want to show you my storage. So this is my storage for size 11 beads. This is my storage for size 6 beads. And this is how I store my specialty beads. My storage needs grew out of need. I started with one container that was similar to this one. It was a plastic container. And, you know, I just kind of started collecting beads in it because I loved beads. I quickly realized that one was not going to be enough, and then it started growing and growing and growing. And then as my needs got greater, I saw more of a need to be able to see all of my beads at one time. So, but I want to kind of help you figure out what might work for you and some of the things that I've tried over the years and what I found works and doesn't work. So I want to start with these kind of keeper boxes. And this is one that we sell on beadmosaic.com. And the reason that I chose to sell this is because I know the system works. Now, you can buy these various versions of these boxes all over the place. Every craft store in America sells its own variation, Walmart. But the reason that I use the ones that I do is because of the way the lid is designed. So if you look right here, there's a built-in grid right there, and the dividers are not removable. So I have had issues with the ones that have the removable dividers, that when I'm trying to take some beads out, the little divider will slide right out, and then my beads are mixed, and I'm not a happy person. So I always get one that has the fixed dividers in it, and I try to get one with the grooves. And what that does is it snaps them into place so that if I am ever moving or these things get knocked around, which they have, then my beads are not going from one compartment into the other. And here is an example of that. So I have had, this is one of my original containers I've had for over 10 years. So they do last if they're well taken care of. And you can stack them really well. Here they are on the bottom. And you can see I'm moving this all over the place. These beads are not traveling from compartment to compartment. And that's really important. On mine, I also use a Sharpie to write on the top where I sourced those beads from, because as a bead collector, you don't know, you're not going to get all your beads from the same place. And sometimes you need to reorder some of those. So I write on who I purchased them from. So it makes it really easy for me to stay organized and get to my beads. So you can sort them however you want. I have mine sorted by color more than size. I do have different compartments that have like extra large ones that I don't use very often. But this is something that I kind of believe in these, and like I said, fixed dividers with the tops on them so that your beads don't travel. On beadmosaic.com, we sell two different ones. This one is 20 compartments, and they're a little bit smaller, which is great for seed beads or bugle beads or any of the smaller types of beads. We also sell one that's 20 compartments, but they're larger. You can kind of see those here. And the larger compartments are really good for something like this, where like this guy, I'm using this to store really large scale beads. It's not something I have a ton of. Actually, the collection is growing more. But this is something that I use for larger scale beads. Now, in this case, I have used one that has the removable dividers on it. You can kind of, this thing's really heavy. You can kind of see it right here where these dividers come up. But when you're using really big beads like this, it doesn't matter because they typically won't move out. But when you're using smaller beads, they like to travel. So be really careful with that. I happened to buy those online. I couldn't find what I needed, and so I ended up buying those. But we do carry, I found a source, yay, for you guys to be able to get the larger compartments that are divided. Another bead storage solution to mention is these plastic boxes. Now these are hard plastic, where the other ones are more of a flexible type of a plastic, but these are crystal clear. And they don't have the protector thing on the top, and they also are much smaller. Now these are great. I use these when I have something really specialty that I'm only gonna have a few of. So you can buy these in most retail stores. I'm looking for a supplier for these for us as well, and we might have it, so check the website. But they come like this. They're bead storage boxes. Now, one of the reasons that I don't prefer this particular type is, one, it doesn't have the top part on it to keep the beads from bleeding over, but that's not really an issue. The issue is that they crack very easily. This type of plastic is much more rigid, and if you place something on top of it that's too heavy or uneven, or it drops and knocks into something, this plastic will crack much more easily than the other softer plastic. So this is something I use, but kind of sporadically, and for some of my smaller collections of beads, my more specialty beads that I use. But it is a good solution. And what I did with mine is I added the little soft feet at the bottom so that I could stack them in my cabinet and they wouldn't scratch, because you can see how scratched up this is. And that's from years of putting these on top of each other and scratching, until I realized one day that I didn't have to let them do that. So I added the little feet to the bottom of it, and that helped tremendously with the scratching. Another thing that I use, and I showed you my shelves, is jars. Now I started using the glass jars, I would say 6 or 7 years ago, when I realized that I was getting so many beads that I was swapping them from compartment to compartment, trying to keep my colors together. And I needed a better organization system. Now, most of you will probably not get to the extreme that I have, where you have over 500 colors of a single size bead. Yeah, I have a little bit of a collection of beads. So the jars worked really well for me, and I chose glass because I didn't want them to fade over time. Not that the plastic ones have been an issue, because I do have plastic ones mixed in and they're not an issue. But one of the keys to these, and I'm trying to find a source for these on beadmosaic.com. We don't have them yet, but we will be getting them. So check and see if we can find them. But is that they have a wide mouth. And the advantage with all of these types of bead storage is that they have a wide mouth. You don't want something that you have to pour the beads into another container in order to start using them. With these, you get direct access. That way you can get your scooper, you can scoop them out, and you can put them on your piece. And I'll talk about scoopers and kind of which ones fit and which ones make it easier and stuff in a little bit, but we're going to do that on another video. But having a wide mouth is really, really important. You want to be able to get at those beads without having to pour them and then pour them back, because that's kind of a recipe for disaster. That's things happen when that happens. So these are great. These are 4-ounce jars. And they do sell smaller ones, they do sell larger ones. This is kind of what I choose to use. It works really well for me. But if you're a little bit short on space, which I'm very fortunate that I have quite a bit of space, but if you're shorter on space, these are a great solution. And these are like kind of the stackable pill bottles that you find at the dollar store. And now these you can't find at the dollar store because they're really big, but you see the little stackable pill bottles. But this is the same concept, but these are much bigger. Now you can see mine's a little bit beat up. I dropped them on the ground a couple of times. But this is a 3-inch round, and it's stackable, and it stacks in the same space that 2 of these jars would. So I use them in my shelf together. And these I use for a little smaller quantities, but these are great because you have the wide mouth, and you can see 4 colors at once. So we do have these. These are your keeper stackers. We do carry these on beadmosaic.com. They come in lots of sizes. I chose to only carry the 3-inch, and then we also have a 1.5 for those smaller quantities. I wouldn't go any smaller than this though, because they're just too tiny, and then you end up with a bunch of teeny little stacks that I don't find quite as useful. But these 2 sizes work really well. Now the smaller stackable we have is actually 5 high instead of 4 high. That's whatever, no big deal either way. But these are 2 solutions that I use quite often as well. There are a lot of things that you can use from your own stashes. I recommend that, you know, use what you can from what you have. But when you're doing bead mosaics, the more organized you are, the better your work is going to be, because you're not going to be frustrated trying to find what you have, trying to figure out what your inventory is. I'm not too obsessed with keeping track of quantities and suppliers and things like that, because I find that beads, they go in and out, part numbers, the die lots are different, things like that. So I typically order in larger quantities, but even ordering in 1/4 pound quantities and 1/2 pound quantities, which I'm working with some of the distributors to try to get for you guys, you do need some good storage and just be able to stay organized. Now, I typically just write down who the distributor was that I purchased them from, so I know the source, but I'm not necessarily obsessive with what the part numbers are and exactly the matching things. With bead mosaics, you don't have to be as precise as you do with jewelry. And especially because you're typically not making the same piece over and over again, and slight variations in color are not going to bother you. They're actually going to enhance your art. But reuse the containers that you have, the little tubes that they come in. I use those sometimes for really small quantities, but I prefer something like this because, again, I don't have to pour it out in order to access it. I want to be able to get easy access. So I have recently just added these storage solutions to beadmosaic.com because people have been asking about them, and I have noticed that they have become harder to find in the stores. A lot of stores are cutting back on their craft supplies. I know Walmart has really cut back on their some of their solutions, and they're becoming more difficult to find at reasonable prices too. So check out beadmosaic.com for your storage needs. I hope this helps answer a few questions for you and help you get organized so you can do more bead mosaics. Thank you. Have a great day.